On a Friday night in late October, when the rain hammered the cracked pavement outside Old Maple Diner and the street lights flickered their usual uncertain yellow, Marcus Sullivan cleared the last table of his shift. The woman had sat in the corner booth for 90 minutes. Black Armani suit, the kind that cost more than 3 months of his rent. A single cup of coffee, refilled twice. One slice of apple pie she'd barely touched. No phone in her hands, no book, just sitting, watching. The bill came to $8.50. Marcus ran her credit card, slid the receipt across the counter. She signed it without looking at him, left the merchant copy face down, and walked into the rain without a word. Marcus picked up the receipt. The tip line, blank, $0. He felt the familiar weight settle in his chest, that dull ache of disappointment he'd learned not to show. Rich people rarely tipped well. They thought the meal was enough. He folded the receipt and moved to clear her table, already thinking about the electric bill due Tuesday, the brake pads his car needed, the protein bars Emma liked that he couldn't afford this week. That was when he saw the envelope. White, crisp, folded once beneath the edge of the plate. On the outside, in handwriting too precise to be careless. For the waiter who remembers names. Marcus's hand shook as he picked it up. Inside, a business card, heavy stock with embossed lettering in a single sheet of paper. The card read, Victoria Sterling, CEO, Sterling Industries. The note said, I need to see you. This is not charity. This is a proposal. Come to Sterling Industries tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Ask for me. Don't ignore this. He knew that name. Everyone did. Forbes had ranked her among the top 50 self-made women in America. Tech industry, billions. The kind of person who moved through the world like gravity bent around her. And she just left him $0 in a cryptic note that might be a prank, might be a scam, might be something he couldn't even begin to understand. Marcus slipped the card and note into his apron pocket and finished his shift in a fog. 2 hours earlier, the dinner rush had been its usual chaos. Frank Morrison sat at the counter, his trucker cap pushed back, telling a story about a load of refrigerators he'd hauled through a Montana blizzard. Marcus had heard it twice before. He listened anyway, nodding in the right places, refilling Frank's coffee for the third time. You're going to fall asleep at the wheel if you keep drinking that, Frank. Frank waved him off, but pushed the whiskey glass away. You worry too much, kid. Someone has to. In booth 3, Beth Harper hunched over a textbook, her coffee gone cold an hour ago, 19 years old, studying nursing at the community college. Marcus had watched her count out coins more than once, her face going red when she came up short. Tonight, she'd ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, toast and coffee. When Marcus brought the check, he'd already crossed out the total and written 0. Beth looked up, her eyes suddenly wet. Marcus, I can't. You can. Pay it forward someday. He moved to the next table before she could argue. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He stepped into the kitchen where Tony Reeves was scrubbing down the grill, 50 years old with the kind of hands that had worked kitchens since he was 15. It's Emma. Tony nodded without looking up. Go ahead. Marcus answered on the second ring. Hey, sweetheart. Daddy. Emma's voice was small and sleepy. 7 years old and already too used to these late-night calls. I miss you. When are you coming home? The question hit him in the chest like it always did, that guilt sharp enough to cut. Not until late, baby. But Mrs. Henderson next door is right there if you need anything. I know. A pause. I just wanted to say goodnight. Good night, Emma. I love you. Love you too, Daddy. Marcus stayed there after she hung up, staring at the cracked tile floor. 5 years of this. 5 years of missing bedtime and school plays and the sound of her breathing in the next room. Jennifer used to say he was the best father she knew. He wondered what she would think now if she could see him standing in this kitchen at 9:30 on a Friday night, his daughter asleep next door at a neighbor's house because he couldn't afford to stop working. Jennifer Sullivan had been a nurse at County Hospital. They'd met when he brought his grandmother in for pneumonia, and she'd stayed 2 hours past her shift to sit with them because his grandmother was scared, and Marcus was 23 and didn't know what to do. Jennifer worked doubles and overnight shifts and never complained. The night before she died, she'd kissed Emma's forehead and told Marcus, give her the life I couldn't give her. He'd been trying. God, he'd been trying, but trying wasn't the same as succeeding. The accident happened on a Tuesday afternoon. A drunk driver ran a red light at the intersection of 5th and Main. Jennifer died before the ambulance arrived. Emma was 2 years old. Someone had to be there when she woke up. Someone had to make breakfast and tie her shoes and read her stories before bed. Someone had to be a father during the hours that counted. Before the accident, Marcus had worked as a software developer for a firm downtown. Decent salary, $68,000 a year. Health insurance, a 401k, a future that made sense. But office jobs meant office hours, and office hours meant Emma would wake up alone, eat breakfast alone, go to school, and come home to an empty apartment. He couldn't do that to her. He wouldn't. Night shifts at Old Maple Diner paid $23,000 a year before tips. It let him sleep when Emma slept, wake when she woke, make her pancakes and walk her to the bus stop and be there when she came home. The money was never enough. It would never be enough. But at least he was there. At least she had him. He was 34 now, though some mornings he felt 50. His uniform was clean but worn thin at the elbows. His smile came easy because he'd learned that kindness cost nothing. And in a place like this, it was the only currency that mattered. Most customers never bothered learning his name. He knew all of theirs. When Marcus pushed back through the kitchen doors, he noticed the woman in the corner booth properly for the first time. She didn't belong here. Everything about her screamed money. The suit, the watch that caught the fluorescent light, the leather handbag that probably cost more than his car was worth. But she sat there like she owned the space, her gaze steady and measuring, the kind of eyes that saw too much. Marcus approached with the coffee pot. "Can I warm that up for you, ma'am?" She looked up, dark eyes, sharp as cut glass. "Hope the coffee is warm enough for this cold night, ma'am." "It's fine." He retreated. Something about her made him uneasy, though he couldn't name it. She didn't fit here, and she knew it, but she stayed anyway. Watching him handle Frank's third refill, watching him cross out Beth's check, watching everything. By the time Marcus got home, it was 2:30 in the morning. The apartment was dark except for the nightlight in Emma's room, a plastic moon that cast soft blue shadows across her face. She slept curled around her stuffed rabbit, her hair tangled on the pillow. Marcus stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching her breathe. This was why he did it. This small person, this entire universe contained in 60 pounds of girl who still believed the world was good because he worked hard enough to keep that illusion alive. His phone buzzed, an email from Emma's school. He opened it, squinting at the screen in the dark hallway. Subject, important update on tuition. Marcus read it twice to make sure he understood. Westbrook Preparatory Academy was implementing a new enhanced STEM program. The curriculum would expand to include advanced mathematics, coding workshops, and laboratory sciences. It was an incredible opportunity for the students. It was also expensive. Next semester's tuition was increasing from $1,200 to $2,800, effective immediately. Marcus sat down on the edge of his bed and stared at the wall. Emma couldn't transfer schools. She had friends at Westbrook. Her teachers knew her name, knew that her mother had died, knew to call Marcus if she seemed sad or withdrawn. It was the only stable thing in her life after Jennifer's death. The one place where she felt safe and normal and seen. He couldn't take that away from her. He wouldn't. But $2,800. His bank account had $340 in it. He got paid next Friday, $430 after taxes. Rent was $850, due in a week. Utilities another $120. Groceries, guess Emma's after-school care. The numbers didn't work. They never worked. The note in his apron pocket felt heavy. He pulled it out and read it again. Victoria Sterling, Sterling Industries. 10 in the morning. This is not charity. This is a proposal. What kind of proposal? What could a billionaire possibly want from a waiter who couldn't even afford his daughter's school tuition? Marcus thought about ignoring it, throwing the note away, pretending this night had been like any other night, just another shift clearing tables and counting tips that didn't add up to enough. Rich people didn't help poor people without wanting something in return. That was how the world worked. He'd learned that lesson over and over every time a customer in a $1,000 suit left $2 on a $30 tab and didn't even look at him on the way out. But then he thought about Emma. About the email from her school, about the $340 that wouldn't stretch no matter how hard he tried to make it. If there was even a 1% chance this could help her, could he really walk away? He lay down but didn't sleep. He watched the ceiling and thought about Jennifer, about the night before she died when she'd held his face in her hands and made him promise, give her the life I couldn't give her. He'd been trying. God, he'd been trying. But trying wasn't enough. At 6 in the morning, Emma crawled into his bed, her hair a mess, her eyes half closed. She pressed her face against his shoulder, warm and small, and trusting in a way that made his throat close. Did you sleep well, Daddy? I did, sweetheart. The lie came easy. He'd had 5 years of practice. I had a dream about Mommy. She said she was proud of us. Marcus pulled her closer, fighting the burn behind his eyes. She is, baby. I promise. Are you going to work today? Not until tonight. We have the whole day. Emma smiled and closed her eyes again. Marcus held her and stared at the wall and made his decision. He would go to Sterling Industries, not because he believed in miracles, not because he thought a billionaire would save him, but because he needed to know what she wanted, why she had sat in that diner for 90 minutes, why she had watched him like he was a puzzle to solve. And maybe, just maybe, because refusing to try felt like giving up, and he had promised Jennifer he would never do that. The building was 42 stories of glass and steel, the kind that reflected clouds and made you feel insignificant just looking at it. Marcus stood on the sidewalk across the street for 10 minutes before he crossed. He wore the only suit he owned, the one from his wedding 7 years ago. It was too tight in the shoulders now, and the pants were a little short, but it was the best he had. The lobby smelled like expensive cologne and fresh flowers. Marble floors, a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a museum. The woman behind it glanced up as Marcus approached, her smile professional and distant. I'm here to see Victoria Sterling. Her smile didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Do you have an appointment? She asked me to come. My name is Marcus Sullivan. The receptionist picked up her phone and murmured something he couldn't hear. She listened, then hung up. When she looked at him this time, there was surprise. 38th floor. The elevator on the left. Marcus rode up alone, watching the numbers climb. His reflection stared back at him from the polished walls. A man in a cheap suit who looked exactly like what he was. Someone who didn't belong here. Someone who cleaned tables and counted tips and couldn't afford his daughter's tuition. Someone who was about to walk into a billionaire's office and pretend he deserved to be there. The doors opened onto a hallway of glass and dark wood. A young man in an expensive suit met him immediately. Mr. Sullivan, right this way. They walked past offices where people sat at computers worth more than Marcus's car, past conference rooms with views that stretched to the horizon. The assistant stopped at a set of double doors at the end of the hall and knocked twice before opening them. Mr. Parker is here. Victoria Sterling stood behind a desk that could have fit Marcus's entire apartment. The office was massive and minimal, all clean lines and natural light. Windows ran from floor to ceiling, overlooking the city like a kingdom spread out below. She wore a different suit today, charcoal gray, and her hair was pulled back in a way that made her look sharper, more dangerous. Thank you, David. The assistant nodded and left, closing the doors behind him. Victoria gestured to the chairs across from her desk. Please sit. Marcus sat. She didn't sit immediately. Instead, she walked to a small table near the window where an expensive coffee maker sat, the kind that ground beans fresh. Coffee? Sure. She made 2 cups in silence, then brought them both to the desk and sat across from him. It was strange watching a billionaire pour coffee. He'd expected her to have someone do it for her, expected her to treat him like the help. But she handed him the cup herself and met his eyes like he was someone worth looking at. Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would. Marcus wrapped his hands around the cup. It was warm and solid, anchoring him to something real. With all respect, Miss Sterling, why am I here? And why the $0 tip? Victoria took a sip of her coffee, then set it down carefully. The tip was a test. I needed to see how you'd react to being overlooked. Something hot flared in Marcus's chest. You tested me? Like some kind of experiment? Yes. She didn't look away, didn't flinch. And you passed. You didn't curse me, didn't complain to your coworkers, didn't even frown. You just said thank you and wished me a good night. Marcus stood up. The chair scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet office. I don't know what kind of game this is, but I'm not interested. It's not a game. Victoria's voice stayed level, calm. Sit down, please. He stayed standing. I came here because I thought maybe you needed something, that maybe this was real, but you're just bored. You wanted to see what the poor waiter would do when you treated him like dirt. I need someone who treats people with dignity, regardless of their status. Victoria stood as well, meeting his eyes across the desk. I've been looking for months. I watched you for 90 minutes in that diner. The way you handled the drunk driver, the college girl who couldn't pay, the phone call with your daughter. You were kind when no one was watching. That's rare. So you insult me to prove a point? I test you to make sure you are real. She walked around the desk, closer now. The space between them felt charged, dangerous. I'm offering you a job, community outreach manager for a project I'm launching. $78,000 a year, full benefits, and a scholarship for your daughter at one of the best private schools in the state. The number hit Marcus like a physical thing. $78,000. He made 23, working 60 hours a week. His mouth went dry. What do you want from me? His voice came out quieter than he meant, rough around the edges. I'm just a waiter. I don't have a degree in community outreach. I don't have connections. What could I possibly do for you? Victoria returned to her desk and picked up a folder. You've been there. You know what it's like to work two jobs and still come up short. To smile at people who don't see you. To make choices no one should have to make. I need someone who won't treat struggling families like charity cases. Someone who will see them as people. She handed him the folder. Marcus opened it slowly. Inside, documents, spreadsheets, photographs. The header on the first page read, Second Chances Initiative. He read through it, his hands starting to shake. A program for single parents in difficult circumstances. Job training, placement assistance, childcare support, educational grants for their children. The budget ran into the millions. You want me to run this? I want you to help build it, to make sure it actually helps people instead of just making me feel good. Victoria sat back down. You have 3 days to think about it. If you say yes, you start in 2 weeks. Marcus closed the folder. This is too much. There has to be a catch. The catch is that you'll work harder than you've ever worked, that you'll carry the weight of knowing families are depending on you, that you'll have to make decisions that affect real lives. She met his eyes. If that sounds easy, then you're not the right person. He wanted to say yes. God, he wanted to say yes. Emma's school bill, the overdue electric, the car that needed new brakes. $78,000 would change everything, but nothing was free. Not like this. Not from people like her. People like her always wanted something, and whatever they wanted, it cost more than money. I need to think about it. Victoria nodded. 3 days, you have my number. Marcus left the folder on her desk and walked out. His hands didn't stop shaking until he was back on the street, the October wind cutting through his cheap suit, the city moving around him like he was standing still. That night at the diner, Marcus told Tony about the meeting. They were in the kitchen during the dinner rush, steam rising from the industrial dishwasher, the smell of grease and coffee and old linoleum thick in the air. Tony scraped the grill with hard, angry motions. Rich people don't give, Marcus. They buy. What do you think she wants to buy from you? I don't know. That's what scares me. Jenny pushed through the doors with a tray of dirty plates. 25 years old, working her way through cosmetology school, the kind of tired that went bone deep. I heard about Sterling. My cousin worked for one of her companies. She's ruthless in business. Fires people without blinking. You sure you want to get involved with someone like that? Marcus leaned against the counter, the doubt wrapping tighter around his chest. I don't know what I want. You want to take care of your kid? Tony's voice softened. We all get that. Just make sure you're not trading one kind of broke for another. After his shift, Marcus picked up Emma from Mrs. Henderson's apartment next door. The older woman waved away his thanks like always, her hands worn from 60 years of factory work, her smile still kind. Emma was tired, rubbing her eyes as they walked the 2 blocks home through streets that smelled like rain and exhaust. Can we stop at the store, Daddy? I need pencils for school. They went to the 24-hour grocery on the corner. The fluorescent lights were too bright, and the floor was sticky, with decades of spilled soda and tracked-in mud. Emma held his hand as they walked down the school supply aisle. She picked out the cheapest pack of pencils, already knowing not to ask for the fancy ones with the cartoon characters, already trained by 5 years of watching her father count money and put things back on shelves. On their way to the register, they passed the book section. Emma stopped, her eyes catching on a colorful cover. A kid's science book filled with pictures of planets and animals and the human body. $18. Marcus watched her reach for it, then pull her hand back. Daddy, can I? She stopped herself, looking up at him with those eyes that were too much like Jennifer's. Never mind, I can get it from the library. Marcus looked at the book, looked at his daughter's face, looked at the way she'd already learned not to ask, not to want, not to expect anything more than what they had. Next time, sweetie. It's okay, Daddy. She said it with such easy acceptance that it broke something in him. I can borrow it from the library. They bought the pencils and walked home in silence. After Emma was asleep, Marcus sat at his laptop and searched for Victoria Sterling. Pages of results came up, articles about her company, interviews about her philanthropy, a Forbes profile from 2 years ago that painted her as a titan of industry, self-made and ruthless and brilliant. He clicked through them, reading everything he could find. Most of it was what he expected. Tech industry, started her company in a garage and built it into something worth billions. But then he found an older article, buried several pages deep. It was from a local newspaper, dated 2010. The headline read, "From Waitress to Boardroom, Victoria Sterling Credits Late Mother's Work Ethic." Marcus read it twice. The article mentioned that Victoria's mother, Sarah Sterling, had worked as a waitress for over 20 years, raising her daughter alone after her husband died when Victoria was 3. Sarah had worked 2 jobs most of her life, sometimes 3, sacrificing everything to put Victoria through school. She'd believed in education like some people believed in God, working herself to exhaustion so her daughter could have what she never had. Sarah Sterling died in 2018. The article didn't say how, only that she passed after a long illness. Marcus stared at the screen. Victoria's mother had been a waitress, a single parent, just like him, just like Jennifer would have been if their positions had been reversed, if Marcus had been the one in the intersection that Tuesday afternoon. He thought about the test, the $0 tip, the way Victoria had watched him all night. Maybe it wasn't cruelty. Maybe it was something else. Maybe she was looking for something she recognized, something she'd lost when her mother died. The next morning, Emma crawled into his bed at 6, her hair wild, her eyes still heavy with sleep. She pressed her face against his shoulder and breathed out slowly, content in the way only children could be, believing that their father's presence was enough to keep the world safe. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart. I dreamed about Mommy again. She was in a garden and there were butterflies everywhere. She said she was proud of us. Marcus's throat closed. He pulled Emma tighter, fighting the burn behind his eyes. She is, baby. I promise she is. Are you going to work today? Not until tonight. We have the whole day together. Emma smiled and closed her eyes again. Marcus held her and felt the weight of everything pressing down. The tuition bill, the job offer, the impossible choice between pride and survival. Jennifer's last words echoing in his head. Give her the life I couldn't give her. He was failing. He knew he was failing. And maybe that was why, when his phone buzzed 2 hours later, he answered before he could talk himself out of it. Miss Sterling, this is Marcus Sullivan. I need to know the real reason. He didn't bother with pleasantries, didn't waste time pretending this was a normal phone call. Why me? The actual reason. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, come back to my office, 2 o'clock. He was there at 1:45. This time, Victoria met him in the lobby herself, which surprised him. She led him not to her office, but to a smaller conference room with a single window and a view of the parking garage. Nothing impressive, nothing designed to intimidate. She sat across from him at the table, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain. My mother's name was Sarah. Victoria's voice was quieter now, stripped of the CEO confidence. She raised me alone. My father died when I was 3. She worked as a waitress at a place called Morton's Diner. 2 shifts a day, sometimes 3. She was exhausted all the time, but she never complained. Not once. Mushu Marcus listened, not interrupting, barely breathing. When I was 15, she got hit by a drunk driver on her way home from work. Broke her back. 3 surgeries. Physical therapy for months. We had insurance, but it wasn't enough. It's never enough. We were going to lose everything. Victoria's voice stayed steady, but her hands were folded tight on the table, the knuckles white. There was a man who used to come into Morton's every morning. My mother said he was poor, worked construction, could barely afford breakfast. But when he heard what happened, he organized a fundraiser, got the whole neighborhood involved, raised enough to cover most of the bills, saved our home. She looked out the window at the concrete and cars, her jaw tight. My mother tried to find him after she recovered, wanted to thank him, pay him back, but he was gone. Moved away, someone said. She never got to thank him. It bothered her for the rest of her life. Marcus felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening to a room he hadn't known existed. And you're looking for him? He died 5 years ago. I found out too late. Victoria turned back to him. But I saw in you what my mother saw in him. Dignity without arrogance. Kindness without expectation. She used to say he always remembered her name, even though she was just the woman who poured his coffee. You do the same thing. You see people. So this is about your mother. This is about honoring what she valued, what she taught me. Victoria's voice was firm now, the CEO returning. I'm not choosing you because you're poor. I'm choosing you because you're good. There's a difference, I bet you. Marcus wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to. But belief had burned him before, left him standing in hospital waiting rooms, in funeral homes, in apartments that felt empty even when his daughter was sleeping in the next room. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? My mother wasn't good enough by society's standards. She never finished college, worked minimum wage her whole life. But she was good. That's what matters. Marcus sat with that for a long moment. The conference room was quiet except for the hum of ventilation and the distant sound of traffic. He thought about Emma, about the science book she wanted, about the tuition bill that would come whether he was ready or not, about Jennifer's last words and the promise he'd made, and the 5 years he'd spent trying to keep it. I need to talk to my daughter. Of course. That evening, Marcus made Emma her favorite dinner. Mac and cheese from a box with hot dogs cut up in it. The meal they'd eaten at least once a week since Jennifer died because it was cheap and Emma loved it, and some traditions mattered more than nutrition. After they ate, he sat her down on the couch, the cushions worn soft from years of use. Emma, I need to talk to you about something important. She looked up at him with those serious eyes, old beyond her years in the way children of tragedy always were. Okay, Daddy. He told her about the job offer, kept it simple, explained about the money and the opportunity and the school, watched her face for any sign of worry, any indication that this would hurt her more than help. Would we have to move? She asked. No, baby. Same apartment, same neighborhood, same friends. Would you still work at night? No, I'd work during the day. I'd be home for dinner every night. Her face lit up in a way that made Marcus's chest hurt, made him realize how much he'd been stealing from her without meaning to. Really? Really? She threw her arms around his neck, her small body warm and trusting and so full of hope it terrified him. Then you should do it, Daddy. I miss you at dinner. Marcus held her tight, his throat closing, the words stuck somewhere between his heart and his mouth. Okay, I will. But the next morning, before he could call Victoria, everything shifted. Someone at Sterling Industries had talked to the press. Maybe the receptionist, maybe a disgruntled employee. It didn't matter who. By noon, a local news website had run a story. The headline made Marcus's stomach turn. Billionaire Sterling plucks waiter from diner for high-paying position. What's the real story? The article was full of speculation, questions about why a successful CEO would hire someone with no experience. implications about their relationship that stopped just short of saying anything actionable but made the suggestion clear enough. By that afternoon, everyone at the diner knew. Tony wouldn't look at him. Jenny kept giving him pitying glances like he'd done something shameful. Even Bob pulled him aside during his shift, his face grave. "Marcus, I don't know what's going on with you and that woman, but be careful. People are talking. There's nothing going on. It's just a job." Bob clapped him on the shoulder, his grip firm. "I believe you, son, but the world's not kind to people who rise too fast." The worst part came that evening. Emma's teacher called. Mrs. Patterson's voice was careful, measured, the tone of someone delivering bad news they wish they didn't have to share. Some of the kids at school had heard their parents talking. They were teasing Emma, calling her dad names they didn't understand but knew were meant to hurt. Gold digger, user, worse things Mrs. Patterson wouldn't repeat. Emma came home crying, her face blotchy, her small body shaking with sobs she'd been holding in all day. Marcus held her in his lap, wiping her tears with hands that wanted to break something, wanted to find whoever had hurt his daughter and make them understand what it felt like to be 7 years old and have your world collapse. "Daddy, did you do something bad?" "No, baby. Daddy didn't do anything wrong." "Then why are they being mean?" "Because people don't always understand, but it's getting to be okay, I promise." After she fell asleep, Marcus sat in the dark apartment and felt the rage and shame and helplessness twist inside him until he couldn't breathe. Everything he'd done to protect Emma, and now she was suffering because of him, because he'd dared to think things could be different, because he'd been stupid enough to hope. He called Victoria. His voice was tight when she answered, barely controlled. "I can't do this. I can't let my daughter suffer because of me." "Marcus, listen. The money isn't worth her dignity. I'm sorry, I can't." He hung up before she could respond, sat there in the dark and felt like he was drowning, like Jennifer was watching him fail from wherever the dead went, watching him break the promise he'd made in that hospital room 7 years ago. The knock came at 8 the next morning. Marcus opened the door to find Victoria Sterling standing in the hallway of his apartment building, looking completely out of place in her expensive coat and heels. The fluorescent hallway light made her look softer somehow, more human. "Can I come in?" He let her in because he didn't know what else to do. She looked around the tiny apartment, the secondhand furniture, the toys scattered on the floor, the life they'd built from scraps and stubbornness. Emma was eating cereal at the small table, still in her pajamas, her eyes red from last night's crying. She looked up, surprised. "Who's that, Daddy?" Victoria walked over and crouched down next to Emma's chair, getting down to her level in a way that seemed practiced, genuine. She pulled a wrapped package from her bag. "Hi, Emma. I brought you something." Emma's eyes went wide. "How did you—" "Your dad told me you liked science. I thought you might like this." Emma looked at Marcus, uncertain. He nodded. She took the package carefully, unwrapping it slowly like it might disappear if she moved too fast. Inside, the $18 science book from the grocery store. The one she'd wanted. The one she'd learned not to ask for. "Thank you," Emma whispered. Victoria stayed crouched there, her eyes level with Emma's. "Your dad is the bravest man I know. He said no to a lot of money because he loves you. He wanted to protect you. That's what real fathers do." Emma's lip trembled. "But the kids at school don't know what they're talking about." Victoria's voice was gentle but firm, the kind of certainty that could anchor a drowning person. "My mom was like your dad. She worked hard. People looked down on her sometimes. But I was proud of her. And you should be proud of your dad. He's a good man. Don't let anyone tell you different." Emma nodded, tears running down her cheeks. Victoria stood and turned to Marcus. "I'm handling the newspaper. They'll print a retraction by tomorrow. And I've already called Emma's school. If any child harasses her again, there will be consequences." She met his eyes. "If you walk away, I respect that. But know this, you're not doing this for money. You're doing this so other families don't have to feel what you're feeling right now. Your daughter will be proud, not because you're rich, because you help people." She walked to the door, then stopped. "You still have 2 days of your decision period left. Think about it." After she left, Emma climbed into Marcus's lap, still holding the book like it was treasure. Daddy, is she nice? He thought about the test and the $0 tip and the woman who'd watched him for 90 minutes to see if he was worth saving, about the mother she'd lost and the debt she was trying to pay to a dead man who'd shown kindness when no one else would. Yeah, baby, I think she is. Then maybe you should help her, like you help people at the diner. Marcus held his daughter and looked at the book in her hands and thought about hope, about whether it was worth the risk, about whether refusing to try was just another kind of failure. The next morning, he called Victoria. I'm in, but I have conditions. I'm listening. 6-month trial period. I don't take the scholarship for Emma until I've proven I can do the job. I keep working 1 shift a week at the diner to remember where I came from. And every decision about the program goes through me. I'm not a figurehead. If I do this, I do it right. There was a brief silence, then, deal, you're tougher than I thought. I learned from watching my wife work doubles. When can you start? 2 weeks. I need to give Bob proper notice. 2 weeks. Victoria's voice held something that might have been pride. Welcome aboard, Marcus. The first month was harder than anything Marcus had imagined. Sterling Industries felt like foreign territory, all glass walls and polished surfaces that reflected a version of himself he didn't recognize. The other employees looked at him with suspicion, their whispers following him down hallways. The guy Victoria plucked from a diner, the charity case she felt sorry for. He heard it all, even when they thought he couldn't. Marcus arrived at 6:30 every morning, the habit of diner shifts burned into his bones. He stayed until 8 at night, sometimes later, reading files on struggling families until his vision blurred. Learning the systems, making calls to nonprofits and job placement agencies, building relationships with people who had actual degrees in social work and community outreach, people who wondered what qualified a waiter to run a multi-million-dollar initiative. He still wore the same suit from his wedding, still took the bus, still lived in the same 1-bedroom apartment where Emma slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. Nothing about his life had changed except where he went during the day, and that difference felt like a chasm he couldn't cross. The other program coordinators were polite but distant. They had their routines, their expertise, their unspoken language of acronyms and grant applications in impact assessments. Marcus felt like he was trying to read a book in a foreign alphabet, every page a reminder of how little he knew. But he worked. God, he worked. Because families were depending on him, and he knew what it felt like to be one of them, to count pennies, to choose between electricity and groceries, to smile at people who looked right through you because you didn't matter enough to remember. The Second Chances Initiative launched 6 weeks after Marcus started. He'd spent those weeks shaping it into something real, something that went beyond checks in the mail and bureaucratic paperwork, job training programs, partnerships with companies willing to hire people who had gaps in their resumes, who needed second chances because life had knocked them down. Childcare assistance so parents could actually attend training without choosing between education and their kids' safety. Educational grants that didn't make people feel like beggars. The first family Marcus helped was Diana Torres, 29 years old, 2 kids aged 5 and 3, working overnight shifts stocking shelves at a grocery store, barely making rent, exhausted in the way that went deeper than sleep could fix. The traditional approach would have been to hand her money and call it help. Marcus sat across from her in a borrowed conference room and asked a different question. What do you want to do? Not just survive, thrive. Diana's eyes filled with tears. I wanted to be a medical billing specialist before the kids, but that was another life. What if it could be this life? The program enrolled Diana in an 8-week certification course. Marcus partnered with County Hospital for job placement, worked out childcare assistance during her classes. 12 weeks later, Diana's income jumped from $28,000 to $52,000. She came to his office and cried, thanking him over and over until he had to walk her to the elevator because she couldn't stop shaking. Don't thank me. Pay it forward someday. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I will. I promise I will. Marcus still worked Friday nights at Old Maple Diner. He'd promised Victoria 1 shift a week, and he kept that promise even when exhaustion made his bones ache. Tony Reeves noticed. The older man saw everything, always had. They were in the kitchen during a rush, Tony working the grill with the efficiency of 35 years' practice. How's the fancy office treating you? Marcus dried dishes, his hands moving on autopilot. It's hard, harder than I expected. You helping people? Trying to. Tony was quiet for a long moment. Then, that woman Diana came in last week. She told Bob you changed her life. Got her a real job. Marcus looked up surprised. Maybe I was wrong about you. Tony's voice was gruff, uncomfortable with the admission. Maybe rich people can give without buying, sometimes. You were protecting me. That's what friends do. Tony nodded and went back to the grill, but something had shifted between them. A wall coming down, brick by careful brick. By month 3, the program had helped 12 families. By month 4, 23. The media coverage shifted from skeptical to curious. A local newspaper ran a feature. Sterling Industries' unusual approach to poverty. Reporters wanted interviews. Marcus refused them all. This isn't about me, it's about them. Victoria approved. That's why it works. You understand the difference between recognition and ego. Then in month 5, Marcus got a call that made his stomach drop. The voice on the other end was professional, measured, delivering bad news with the practiced neutrality of someone who had done it before. Mr. Sullivan, this is Janet Morris from Family Services. We need to discuss the Chen family. Marcus pulled up the file. Robert and Linda Chen, 2 daughters, ages 8 and 6. Robert had been enrolled in the welding certification program. Linda had gotten part-time work as a receptionist while attending evening classes for her accounting certificate, one of their success stories. Marcus had checked in with them just 2 weeks ago, and everything had seemed fine. What happened? Robert was arrested last night, possession with intent to distribute. He's being held on $50,000 bail. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. That's not possible. He was clean. We had him in counseling, regular check-ins. The evidence was in his vehicle during a routine traffic stop. Significant quantity. This wasn't personal use, Mr. Sullivan. Marcus closed his eyes. What about Linda and the girls? She's devastated. Lost her job this morning. The arrest made the local news. She's talking about dropping out of her classes. The landlord is already threatening eviction because of the publicity. Janet's voice softened slightly. I know your program invested a lot in this family. I'm sorry. After the call ended, Marcus sat at his desk and felt the weight of failure settle over him like a shroud. 6 months of work, childcare support, job training, counseling, thousands of dollars invested, and it had all collapsed in a single night because Robert Chen had made a choice that destroyed everything. The whispers started within hours. Other Sterling employees had access to the program files. They knew the Chen family had been a showcase example, one of the families Marcus had highlighted in reports to the board. Now those same people were asking quiet questions. How much due diligence had really been done? What kind of screening process allowed a drug dealer into a program funded by Sterling Industries? Was this what happened when you hired someone with no actual experience in social work? Marcus wanted to defend Robert, wanted to believe there was a mistake, a setup, some explanation that would make sense. But the evidence was damning. And worse than the legal reality was the emotional truth. Marcus had trusted his instincts, had believed that seeing people as human beings was enough. He'd been wrong. That Friday night at the diner, Bob pulled Marcus aside during a slow moment. Heard about that family in your program, the one that got arrested. Marcus's jaw tightened. News travels fast. Small city, people talk. Bob leaned against the counter, his weathered face thoughtful. You blaming yourself? I should have seen it, should have known. Known what? That people are complicated? That sometimes they make terrible choices even when they're trying to do better? Bob shook his head. You can't save everyone, Marcus. You can only give them a chance. What they do with it, that's on them. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he'd failed. Failed Robert and Linda and their 2 daughters, who were now facing eviction and shame because their father had made a catastrophic mistake. Failed Victoria, who trusted him with millions of dollars and a program that bore her mother's legacy. Failed everyone who believed that giving people dignity would be enough to change their lives. Emma noticed something was wrong. She always did. That weekend, she climbed into his lap while he was staring at his laptop, not really seeing the spreadsheet on the screen. Daddy, you're sad. Marcus wrapped his arms around her. Just thinking about work, sweetheart. Did something bad happen? He thought about lying, about protecting her from the messy reality of adult failure. But Emma deserved honesty, and she was already too good at reading his face to be fooled by easy reassurances. Someone I was helping made a really bad choice, and now their whole family is in trouble. Emma was quiet for a moment, her small hand resting on his arm. Is it your fault they made the bad choice? I was supposed to help them make good choices. But they chose, right? Not you. Marcus looked at his 7-year-old daughter and felt something shift. She was right. He'd given Robert Chen tools and opportunities and support. The choice to throw it all away, that had been Robert's alone. But the doubt didn't disappear. It just settled deeper, where logic couldn't quite reach it. By month 6, Marcus was questioning everything. The program continued, 30 families now, then 40. But every success felt fragile, temporary. Every phone call could be the next disaster. Every intake interview could be another Robert Chen, someone who'd smile and nod and take the help and then make a choice that destroyed not just themselves, but everyone around them. The other program coordinators noticed. In meetings, Marcus was quieter, more hesitant. He second-guessed decisions he would have made instinctively before. When a new family came in, Jerome Miller, single father of 3, lost his job due to a workplace injury. Marcus spent 3 days reviewing the application, looking for red flags, trying to predict where it might all go wrong. Victoria called him to her office on a Tuesday afternoon in month 6. She sat across from him, her gaze sharp and assessing. What happened to you? Marcus shifted in his chair. I don't know what you mean. The Chen case broke something. You're hesitating, doubting every decision. That's not the person I hired. Maybe the person you hired was naive. Maybe I didn't understand how badly this could go wrong. Victoria leaned back. Do you know how many business ventures I've started that failed? 7 complete failures, millions of dollars lost, ideas that seemed brilliant and turned out to be disasters. She paused. Did those failures mean I should stop trying? That every risk was foolish? This isn't about money, it's about people's lives. Exactly, which is why the stakes matter more, not less. Robert Chen made a choice, a terrible one. But Linda Chen is still in the program. She's still attending her classes. She's fighting for her daughters. Are you going to abandon her because her husband failed? Marcus felt the words hit him like cold water. Of course not. Then stop letting one failure define everything. You've helped 40 families in 6 months. 40. Diana Torres is thriving. Tony Reeves is in culinary school. Jerome Miller just started physical therapy and job retraining. Those people are real. Their success is real. Don't let Robert Chen's mistakes erase that. Marcus wanted to believe her, wanted to recapture the certainty he'd felt those first few months, when everything seemed possible and hope felt like enough. But the doubt had settled deep, and shaking it loose wasn't as simple as logic. That night, Marcus worked his Friday shift at the diner and thought about quitting. Not the diner job, that was his anchor, his reminder, but the program, Sterling Industries, the weight of carrying other people's futures on shoulders that suddenly felt too weak to bear it. He was clearing tables when a woman walked in he hadn't seen in months. Linda Chen. She looked thinner, older, the weight of the past few weeks visible in every line of her face. She saw Marcus and hesitated, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. Marcus walked over to her booth. Linda, how are you? Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry about Robert, about everything. You have nothing to apologize for. I wanted to tell you I'm staying in the program, if you'll still have me. Linda wiped her eyes. I know what Robert did reflects on me, on you, on everyone who tried to help us. But my girls need me to finish. They need me to show them that one person's mistakes don't define a whole family. Marcus sat down across from her. Of course you're still in the program. You didn't do anything wrong. I chose him. I believed in him. Doesn't that make me responsible too? No, it makes you human. It makes you someone who saw the best in another person and hoped they'd live up to it. That's not a failure, Linda. That's courage. She started crying harder. Marcus handed her napkins and sat with her while she composed herself. When she finally left, she squeezed his hand and whispered thank you, and Marcus felt something in his chest unlock. Bob had been watching from behind the counter. Feel better? A little. Good, because wallowing doesn't help anyone. You made a mistake trusting that guy? Fine. Learn from it, get better at screening. But don't stop believing people can change. That's the only thing that actually works. Marcus nodded. The doubt was still there, but it had shifted, not disappeared. Maybe it never would, but transformed into something more like caution, like wisdom earned the hard way. He'd trusted too easily with Robert Chen. Next time he'd be smarter. But he wouldn't stop trying. Then in month 7, on a Tuesday afternoon, Victoria collapsed. Yeah. Marcus was reviewing applications when David burst into his office, his usual composure shattered. Victoria's down, ambulance was on the way. They found her on the floor of her office, conscious but pale, her breathing shallow. The paramedics arrived within minutes. Exhaustion, they said. Dehydration. She'd been working 90-hour weeks for months, running the company, and overseeing a dozen initiatives simultaneously. Her body had simply given out. At the hospital, the doctors kept her overnight for observation. Marcus sat in the waiting room with David and 3 other executives, all of them silent. Victoria Sterling was invincible. Victoria Sterling didn't collapse. But she had, and now they were all confronted with the reality that their leader was human after all. The next morning, David pulled Marcus aside. There's an emergency board meeting. They're discussing the Second Chances initiative. Marcus's stomach dropped. What about it? They want to cut it. They're saying it's too expensive, unclear return on investment, that Victoria spread herself too thin trying to oversee everything personally. David's face was grim. Richard Caldwell is leading the charge. He's been against the program from the start. Can they do that? They're the board. They can do whatever they vote to do. Marcus felt rage and fear twist together in his gut. 40 families who were finally getting their feet under them, who were learning skills and finding ours and believing that life could be different. And a room full of millionaires was going to cut them loose because the numbers didn't look good on a spreadsheet. When's the meeting? Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. David looked at him carefully. You're not invited, Marcus. It's a closed executive session. Marcus nodded, but he was already planning. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Sterling Industries at 7. He wore his wedding suit, the shoulders still too tight, the pants still too short. He took the elevator to the executive floor, where the conference room sat at the far end of the hall. Through the glass walls, he could see the board members gathering. 12 people in expensive suits, coffee service laid out. The kind of meeting that decided the fate of thousands without ever seeing their faces. Marcus walked in uninvited. Richard Caldwell looked up, his silver hair perfectly styled, his face settling into an expression of cold displeasure. Mr. Sullivan, this is a closed meeting. I know, I'm here anyway. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. Marcus stayed standing, his hands steady despite the fear churning in his stomach. He thought about Diana, about Tony, who'd finally started believing, about Linda Chen, fighting to save her family despite her husband's catastrophic mistake, about Emma asking why he didn't help other kids like her. You want to cut the program? I'm here to tell you why you shouldn't. Caldwell's voice could have frozen water. We've reviewed the numbers. The numbers don't tell you everything. Marcus looked at each board member in turn. I could show you spreadsheets and projected returns. I could talk about tax benefits and positive press, but that's not why this matters. He moved closer to the table, the physical space between him and them feeling like a chasm he was determined to cross. Victoria's mother was a waitress, worked 2 jobs her whole life. When she got hurt, a construction worker who could barely afford breakfast organized a fundraiser to help her. Saved their home. Saved Sarah Sterling's life. That man didn't do it for tax benefits. He did it because he saw her, because she remembered his name, because dignity matters more than spreadsheets. The room was absolutely silent. Marcus felt the weight of every eye on him, but he didn't look away. You're not investing in a program. You're investing in dignity, and dignity pays back in ways money can't measure. It pays back in kids who grow up without shame, in parents who can look their children in the eye, in communities that remember kindness and pass it forward. Marcus put his hands flat on the conference table. Diana Torres was one of our first participants. She's already volunteering to help other mothers. Tony Reeves is mentoring younger cooks. Linda Chen is finishing her degree despite her husband's arrest, showing her daughters that one person's mistakes don't define a whole family. That's not on any spreadsheet, but that's what lasts. That's what builds something bigger than profit margins. His voice grew stronger, fueled by months of watching families transform. If you cut this program, you're not just cutting costs, you're cutting hope. You're telling 40 families that they don't matter enough to invest in, that their dignity isn't worth protecting. And I won't be part of that. Marcus straightened. Either you keep it running or I walk. Your choice. He turned and left before anyone could respond. His hands started shaking in the elevator, the adrenaline finally catching up. He just threatened to quit in front of the board of directors. He just walked into a closed meeting and delivered an ultimatum to people who could crush him without a second thought. He went to his office and waited. 2 hours later, David appeared in his doorway. The board voted. Marcus's heart stopped. And? Unanimous decision to continue funding. Richard Caldwell himself proposed increasing the budget by 30%. David was smiling. What did you say to them? The truth. That afternoon, Victoria called from the hospital. I heard what you did. You gave me a chance. I just protected it. You did more than that. You reminded them why we started this company, why any of this matters. Her voice was tired but steady. Thank you, Marcus. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck. The doctors say I need to delegate more, work fewer hours. She laughed, the sound rough. Apparently, I'm not invincible. None of us are. No, but some of us are brave enough to walk into rooms where we don't belong and tell the truth anyway. That's its own kind of strength. 2 weeks later, Victoria returned to the office. She looked thinner, more fragile than Marcus had ever seen her. But her eyes were sharp, her presence still commanding. She called Marcus to her office on her first day back. I'm promoting you, Director of Community Outreach. $92,000 a year. Marcus opened his mouth to protest. Don't argue, you earned it. More importantly, you've proven you can handle the responsibility. She slid a document across her desk. I'm also restructuring my workload. I can't oversee everything personally anymore. I need people I trust to carry the vision forward. People like you. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Yes, Victoria smiled. Good, because we're expanding to 3 more cities, and you're going to help me choose the directors for each location. Marcus left her office feeling like he'd stepped through a door into a different version of his life. The program was growing, families were thriving. Emma came home from school now talking about her science project on gravity and how kindness spreads like invisible forces pulling people together. At the diner that Friday, Tony clapped him on the back. Heard you got promoted, fancy title and everything. Don't start. I'm serious. I'm proud of you, man. You did what you said you'd do. You helped people. Tony paused. Speaking of which, I've been thinking, that culinary program you told me about. Marcus looked up surprised. Think there's room for an old kitchen guy who wants to be more than a short order cook? 2 weeks later, Tony enrolled in a certification program to become a sous chef. The program covered tuition, connected him with a mentor at one of the best restaurants downtown. 6 months later, Tony would be making twice what he'd made at the diner, working in a kitchen where his skills finally meant something beyond survival. Marcus kept his promise. Every Friday night, he worked one shift at Old Maple Diner. Bob didn't need him anymore. Business was steady, staff was good, but Marcus needed the reminder. Needed to stay connected to the person he'd been, the struggles that still defined so many lives. Needed to remember that dignity wasn't something you achieved and left behind. It was something you fought for every day, in every interaction. The program helped 50 families by month 8, 70 by month 9. The success rate held above 80%, even accounting for Robert Chen's failure. Media coverage turned positive, though Marcus still refused personal interviews. This wasn't about him. It had never been about him. It was about Sarah Sterling and the construction worker who'd saved her, about Jennifer and the promise Marcus had made, About Emma and all the other children who deserved to grow up believing the world could be kind, about the invisible threads connecting stranger to stranger, act of generosity to act of generosity, building something stronger than any single person could create alone. The check from his first full month as director sat in Marcus's wallet for 3 days before he deposited it. $92,000 a year felt like more money than he knew what to do with. He paid Emma's tuition in full for the year, fixed his car's brakes, bought groceries without counting every item, put money aside for emergencies that had always felt like catastrophes waiting to happen. But he didn't move, didn't upgrade his apartment, or buy new clothes, or change the fundamental shape of his life. Because Emma's friends were here. Because Mrs. Henderson next door had been there for them when they needed help. Because this neighborhood, with its cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights, was home in a way that money couldn't replicate. Some things you earned, some things you kept, and some things you remembered, no matter how far you climbed, because forgetting meant losing the part of yourself that mattered most. Part 2 complete, 5,012 words. By month 12, the Second Chances Initiative had transformed from an experiment into a model. Victoria returned to work with new boundaries. No more 90-hour weeks, no more trying to control every detail. She'd learned something from the hospital bed that years of success hadn't taught her. Strength wasn't carrying everything alone. It was building a team capable enough to carry it with you. Victoria promoted Marcus to Director of Community Outreach with a salary of $92,000. The number still made him dizzy when he thought about it. 3 years ago, he'd been counting quarters for Emma's school supplies. Now he was overseeing a budget that ran into the millions, making decisions that affected hundreds of families across 5 cities. The program had scaled beyond anything Marcus imagined that first morning in Victoria's office. 120 families receiving support. 85% job placement success rate, average income increases of 60% within 6 months. 3 child care centers offering subsidized care. Partnerships with 15 companies actively hiring program graduates. Educational grants for over 300 children whose parents were finally stable enough to think beyond next week's rent. The numbers were impressive. But Marcus knew they didn't capture the real story. They didn't show Diana Torres volunteering 20 hours a week to mentor other single mothers. Didn't show Tony Reeves teaching knife skills to teenagers who'd never imagined working in a real kitchen. Didn't show the way hope spread like wildfire once people believed change was actually possible. National nonprofit organizations started calling. Could they replicate the model in their cities? What made Sterling's approach different? Marcus found himself on conference calls with directors from Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle, explaining that the secret wasn't complicated. See people as human beings first. Treat dignity as the outcome, not employment. Understand that a job was just a tool. What mattered was giving someone the foundation to build a life worth living. Tony graduated from his culinary certification program in month 14. Marcus and Emma attended the ceremony at a hotel downtown, the kind of place Tony had probably never imagined himself belonging. Tony stood on stage in his new chef's whites, his weathered hands holding a certificate that represented 6 months of early mornings and aching feet and learning techniques he'd never had the chance to study. His voice cracked when he spoke. A year ago, I told Marcus Sullivan that rich people don't give, they buy. I was wrong about a lot of things. Some people invest, and that investment changes lives in ways that can't be measured. He looked directly at Marcus. Thank you for seeing something in a 50-year-old line cook that I stopped seeing in myself. Afterward, in the parking lot, Tony pulled Marcus into a rough hug. I started at Meridian next week. Sous chef, $65,000 a year. Marcus's throat was tight. You earned it. We both know that's not entirely true. You opened a door I didn't even know existed. Tony pulled back, his eyes wet. How do I pay that back? You already are. Those 2 kids you're mentoring at the community center? That's how it works. You pass it forward. 3 weeks later, an envelope arrived at Marcus's office. Heavy cream paper, embossed return address, Westbrook Preparatory Academy. He opened it standing by the window, the afternoon sun slanting through glass that no longer felt quite so foreign. The letter was formal, congratulatory. Emma Sullivan had been selected for the Victoria Sterling Excellence Scholarship. Full tuition for 4 years. recognition of her academic achievement and her father's contributions to the community. An opportunity to access the kind of education that would open doors Marcus had never been able to walk through himself. He'd earned this, spent 14 months proving he could handle the responsibility Victoria had given him, transformed a theoretical initiative into something that actually worked. Emma deserved this. She was bright, curious, already reading 2 grades above her level. A school like Westbrook could nurture that, give her advantages that would compound over time. But when Marcus looked at the letter, all he could see was Emma in her current classroom. The way her teacher knew she sometimes got sad around Mother's Day and made sure she had extra support. The way her classmates had known her since kindergarten, knew her story, accepted her as one of them. The way she came home talking about lunch with Sarah and recess with Miguel, and how everyone was excited about the science fair. That evening, Marcus made Emma's favorite dinner, spaghetti with butter and parmesan, simple enough that she'd eat it without complaint. After the dishes were cleared, he sat her down on their worn couch. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something important." She looked up at him with those serious eyes, Jennifer's eyes, already bracing for news that might hurt. 7 years old and she'd learned to expect complications. "Remember when I started my new job? Victoria said she'd help with school costs if things worked out." Emma nodded slowly. "Well, things worked out. There's a scholarship to a really good school, small classes, science labs, computers for every student, the best resources money can buy. Would I have to leave my school?" The question cut straight to what mattered. Marcus had underestimated his daughter again, thought she'd be excited about new opportunities. But Emma understood something he was still learning. "You'd make new friends." "Would they be like me?" Emma's voice was small. "Would they understand about mommy? Would they know what it's like when your dad works hard and things are still tight sometimes?" Marcus felt something crack in his chest. "No, baby, most of them wouldn't. Their parents are very wealthy. Their lives are different." And Emma was quiet for a long moment, her small hands twisting in her lap. "I like my school. Miss Patterson knows me. Sarah and Miguel know me. They remember mommy's name. Would the new kids understand why that matters?" Marcus looked at his daughter and saw a wisdom that had nothing to do with age. She understood that belonging wasn't about advantages. It was about being known, being seen, having a place where your story made sense to the people around you. "You're right, sweetheart. They might not understand." "Then I don't want to go. I want to stay where people know me." The next morning, Marcus called Westbrook Preparatory Academy's admissions office. The director sounded confused when Marcus declined the scholarship. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm not sure you understand what you're turning down. This is one of the most prestigious—" "I understand perfectly. My daughter needs to stay where she has roots, where the kids understand her life, where she's not the outsider trying to fit into a world that wasn't built for her. But the opportunities, she's 7 years old. The opportunity she needs most is to be herself without apology." Marcus hung up and called Victoria. "I'm declining the scholarship for Emma." There was a long pause on the other end. "Can I ask why?" "She needs to stay in a school where kids understand what it's like to have less, where she's not learning that her old life is something to be ashamed of." Marcus stared out his office window at the city stretching below. The fancy school would give her advantages, but it might cost her identity. Victoria was quiet for several heartbeats. Then, "My mother worked herself to death so I could go to private school. I got an education that opened every door, but I lost connection to where I came from. It took me years to find it again, and even now there are pieces I can't recover." "I don't want that for Emma. You're wiser than I gave you credit for. You're teaching your daughter that she's enough as she is. That's worth more than any advantage money can buy." Marcus felt the weight of the decision settle. Not regret, something closer to peace. She already has everything that matters. She just needs time to grow into it. The Second Chances Initiative celebrated its first anniversary in month 20. The event at Sterling Industries drew 200 people, families who'd been helped, board members who'd funded the expansion, media who documented the transformation. Emma and several other program kids helped serve food, proud to be part of something bigger than themselves. Diana Torres gave a speech that left half the room in tears. "This program didn't just give me a job. It gave me the ability to look my children in the eye and tell them we were going to be okay. It gave me dignity when I'd forgotten what that felt like. Tony demonstrated cooking techniques for a crowd that had probably never considered where their expensive restaurant meals came from. His hands move with confidence now, creating beauty from simple ingredients, proving that skill and dedication mattered more than pedigree. Marcus stood at the back and watched it all unfold. Victoria found him there, her presence no longer intimidating, just familiar. You did this. We did this. You took the risk. I just made sure it lived up to the promise. Don't diminish what you've built. You turned an idea into a movement. Victoria's voice carried the kind of certainty that made him believe it might be true. 3 cities have already implemented versions of our model. 2 more are in planning stages. You've proven that treating people with dignity isn't charity, it's the smartest investment anyone can make. National Public Radio interviewed Marcus and Victoria together a week later. The first time Marcus had agreed to media attention, and only because Victoria asked him to. They sat in a studio downtown, microphones between them, a host who'd done her research asking questions that actually mattered. What makes your program different from traditional poverty assistance? Marcus leaned forward. We don't see poverty as a moral failing. We see it as a circumstantial challenge that requires practical solutions. Jobs, childcare, education. These aren't handouts. They're tools. We're just making sure people have access to the tools they need to build something sustainable. And the results speak for themselves. The results are people. Diana Torres makes $52,000 a year now. Tony Reeves is a sous chef at one of the best restaurants in the city. Those aren't statistics. They're human beings who got a fair shot. The interviewer turned to Victoria. Why invest so heavily in a program that doesn't generate traditional returns? Because some returns can't be measured in dollars. My mother was a waitress who raised me alone. When she got injured, a man who could barely afford breakfast organized a fundraiser that saved our home. He died before I could thank him. This program is how I thank him, by being for others what he was for us. Forbes ran a profile the following month. The waiter who revolutionized corporate philanthropy. Marcus cringed at the headline but understood the impact. Other companies were watching. Other CEOs were asking if compassion could coexist with profit. The answer, it turned out, was yes. When you invested in dignity, people invested back in ways that strengthened communities, reduced social costs, created ripples that touched thousands of lives. Marcus's salary as director of community outreach meant he could afford a better apartment. Emma could have her own bedroom. They could move to a neighborhood with better schools, safer streets, more opportunities. But when Marcus brought it up, Emma's response was immediate and firm. No, my friends are here, Mrs. Henderson is here, all my memories of mommy are here. Marcus looked around their cramped apartment and realized Emma was right. This place held Jennifer's ghost in the best possible way. The corner where they'd put up Christmas trees. The kitchen where Jennifer had taught Emma to crack eggs. The bathroom where Marcus had given Emma her first haircut. Both of them crying because it meant she was growing up. They stayed. Marcus fixed things that had been broken for years. The leaky faucet, the loose tile, the door that stuck in humid weather. He painted Emma's room the pale blue she'd always wanted. Bought new furniture slowly, piece by piece, never forgetting what it felt like to count every dollar. The bank account was healthy now, college fund growing. Emergency savings that meant an unexpected expense wouldn't destroy everything. But Marcus still drove the same car, still wore simple clothes, still lived in a way that kept him connected to the person he'd been. Because that person wasn't something to leave behind. That person was the foundation of everything that mattered. Emma thrived. Straight A's, president of the science club. The kind of kid who helped classmates who struggled, who understood that intelligence meant nothing if you used it to make others feel small. Her teacher told Marcus at parent conferences, Emma has a gift for seeing when someone's hurting. She notices the kids who eat alone, who don't have nice clothes, who try to hide their struggles. She makes them feel seen. Marcus thought about Jennifer, about the nurse who'd stayed 2 hours past her shift to sit with a scared old woman and her terrified grandson. About how kindness wasn't something you taught. It was something you modeled until it became instinct. 14 months after that Friday night when Victoria Sterling left a $0 tip, Marcus worked his regular Friday shift at Old Maple Diner. He still did this once a week, still needed the reminder of where he'd come from. Bob had offered to hire someone else. Business was steady, staff was good, but Marcus kept coming back because this place was his anchor. The diner closed at 11 on Fridays. By 10:30, only a handful of customers remained. Frank Morrison at the counter, nursing his third coffee before a long haul to Pennsylvania. A couple of college kids studying for exams. And a young man who'd walked in 5 minutes ago, his clothes stained with paint, his face carrying the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than one long day. The young man sat at the counter and studied the menu with the careful attention of someone counting every dollar. Marcus recognized that look, had worn it himself for 5 years, memorizing prices, calculating what he could afford versus what he actually needed. "What can I get you?" The young man looked up. 25, maybe 26. Dark circles under his eyes, hands marked with dried paint and old calluses. "Just coffee, please. Cheapest you've got." Marcus poured a cup of the house blend, set it down with a warmth he'd learned from years of being invisible. "Long day?" "Long 3 days. 3 jobs right now, trying to make rent and tuition." "What are you studying?" "Art, painting specifically. I know it sounds stupid." The young man stopped, like he'd heard this criticism so many times he'd started to believe it. "Everyone says I should study something practical." Marcus thought about Victoria's test, about the $0 tip and the note that had changed everything, about Sarah Sterling and the construction worker who'd helped her, about how small acts of recognition could alter the entire trajectory of a life. "What kind of painting?" The young man's face brightened, surprised someone was asking. "Cityscapes mostly, trying to capture how places feel, not just how they look. The weight of a neighborhood, the soul of a street corner. Probably sounds pretentious. Sounds like you see things most people miss." They talked for a few minutes about art and survival and the gambling math of choosing passion over security. The young man's name was Daniel Wright, 25 years old, working as a house painter during the day, restaurant delivery at night, weekend shifts stocking shelves, putting himself through art school one semester at a time because he couldn't afford to stop working long enough to attend full-time. When Marcus brought the check, $2.50 for coffee, Daniel pulled out his wallet and counted the bills inside. 3 singles and some change. Enough for the coffee and maybe bus fare home. Maybe. Marcus picked up the check. "Someone paid it forward for you. Just remember to do the same someday." Daniel looked up, his eyes suddenly wet. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. Go home, get some sleep, keep painting." "I don't know what to say. Thank you. I really needed this today." After Daniel left, Marcus cleared the counter and felt the satisfaction of completing a circle. From construction worker to Sarah Sterling, to Victoria, to him, to Daniel, and eventually to whoever Daniel would help when he could. This was how the world got better, not through grand gestures, but through countless small recognitions that someone's struggle mattered, that their dream deserved protection, that their dignity was worth defending. Marcus turned to wipe down the coffee maker and stopped. In the corner booth, the same booth where this had all started 14 months ago, Victoria Sterling sat with a cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie she hadn't touched. He walked over, unable to suppress his smile. Most CEOs don't hang out in diners at 11 p.m. Most CEOs don't know what they're missing. Victoria finished her coffee and stood, placing two $50 bills on the table, $100 for an $8 meal. Beneath the bills, a folded note. Marcus picked it up, his hands steady now where they'd shaken that first night. The note read, "You're doing great. Keep going. V.S." He looked up. Victoria was walking toward the door, but she stopped and turned back. "That young man you just helped, his name is Daniel Wright. He's going to be fine because someone saw him." Her voice carried across the empty diner. "Just like someone saw you." She left. Marcus stood there holding the note and the $100, thinking about how kindness didn't end. It multiplied. How every act of recognition created ripples that spread further than anyone could track. How the construction worker who'd helped Sarah Sterling 40 years ago could never have imagined that his small fundraiser would eventually help hundreds of families across 5 cities. Marcus put the $100 in the team tip jar where it would be split among all the servers tomorrow. But he kept the note, added it to the collection in his desk drawer. 3 notes now, 3 reminders of the journey from desperate waiter to director of a program that was changing lives. The rain had stopped. The streets were quiet, washed clean by the storm that had blown through earlier. Marcus locked up the diner and walked to his car, his phone buzzing with a text from Emma. "Love you, Daddy. Can't wait to show you my science fair project tomorrow." He smiled and texted back, then sat in his car for a moment before starting the engine. Thought about Jennifer and the promise he'd made, about Emma growing up proud instead of ashamed, about Tony cooking in a real kitchen, about Diana mentoring other mothers, about Daniel Wright going home tonight with enough money for bus fare and a little bit of hope. 6 months later, the Second Chances Initiative expanded to 8 cities. Marcus became vice president of community impact at a salary of $110,000. Victoria had fully recovered, working reasonable hours, delegating effectively, finally understanding that sustainable change required sustainable people. Emma won first place at her school's science fair with a project titled "How Kindness Spreads Like Gravity." She'd interviewed Diana, Tony, Daniel, and a dozen others from the program, creating a visual map of how one act of help created chains of assistance that spread through communities like invisible forces, pulling people toward each other. Her presentation concluded, "My dad showed me that helping people isn't charity, it's investment, and investments grow." Marcus stood in the back of the gymnasium, tears streaming down his face, thinking about Jennifer and hoping she could see this, could see Emma confident and compassionate and exactly the person they'd hoped she'd become, could see that the promise had been kept, not through money or opportunities or advantages, but through the simple act of teaching a child that dignity mattered more than status. Marcus still worked one Friday shift a month at Old Maple Diner. The frequency had decreased, responsibilities grew, hours became scarce, but he never stopped entirely. This place was his reminder, his anchor. The point of origin for everything that came after. Bob had hired a new kid, Carlos, 19 years old, and learning the rhythms of service work. Marcus taught him the things that mattered. Remember names, see people. Small kindnesses create impacts you'll never witness, but that matter more than you'll ever know. "Is that how you became VP?" Carlos asked one night, impressed by the title he'd learned from another server. Marcus thought about the question, about Victoria's test and the $0 tip and the note that had changed everything, about Sarah Sterling and the construction worker, about Emma and Jennifer and every person who'd ever been invisible. "No, that's how I became myself. The job was just what happened after." On his last shift of the year, Marcus served an elderly woman who counted out exact change for her coffee and toast. She apologized for not leaving a tip, her hands shaking with age or embarrassment or both. Marcus picked up her check and crossed out the total, wrote 0 in bold numbers. "Someone did this for me once. Pass it forward when you can." The woman started crying. Marcus brought her a glass of water and a quiet moment to compose herself. Carlos watched from the kitchen, learning that dignity wasn't about what people could afford. It was about how you treated them when they had nothing left to give. At midnight, Marcus took off his apron and walked out into December cold. Victoria wasn't waiting in the corner booth tonight. She'd moved on to other projects, other ways of honoring her mother's memory. But the lesson remained, the circle continued. The invisible threads connecting stranger to stranger grew stronger with every act of recognition. Emma was asleep when Marcus got home, her science fair ribbon pinned to the bulletin board in her room. Mrs. Henderson had stayed late, as always, refusing payment, as always, part of the network of support that kept their small family functioning. Marcus stood in Emma's doorway and watched her breathe, this miracle he and Jennifer had created, this person who understood that helping others wasn't obligation. It was privilege, the chance to be for someone else what others had been for you, the opportunity to prove that the world was better than cynicism suggested, kinder than despair allowed. In his desk drawer, Marcus kept 3 notes. Victoria's first. For the waiter who remembers names. Victoria's second. You're doing great. keep going. And Emma's, written in careful 7-year-old handwriting, Daddy, when I grow up, I want to help people like you do. Love, Emma. Some tips weren't measured in dollars. Some tips changed lives. And the best tips, the ones that really mattered, kept changing lives long after the original giver was gone, spreading through communities and across generations like gravity itself, invisible but undeniable, pulling people toward connection instead of isolation, toward hope instead of despair. Marcus thought about the construction worker who'd organized a fundraiser for Sarah Sterling 40 years ago. Thought about how that man had died never knowing what his kindness had created, never knowing that his small act would eventually help thousands of families, never knowing that a waitress's daughter would become a billionaire who would honor him by helping others the way he'd helped her mother. The man was gone, but his legacy lived in every family the Second Chances Initiative supported, in every child who grew up with enough, in every parent who learned they deserved dignity. In Marcus and Emma and Tony and Diana and Daniel and thousands of others whose lives had been changed by a program that existed because someone had been kind when they didn't have to be. Some debts could never be repaid, but they could be honored. They could be passed forward. They could become the foundation of something bigger than any single person, any single act, any single moment of recognition. Marcus closed Emma's door quietly and went to his own room, where Jennifer's photo still sat on the nightstand. 7 years gone, but present in everything that mattered. In Emma's kindness, in Marcus's determination, in the life they'd built from grief and stubbornness and the refusal to let loss define them. We did it, he whispered to the photo. She's going to be okay. Better than okay. She's going to be exactly who you hoped she'd be. The rain started again, gentle against the windows, washing the streets clean for tomorrow. And tomorrow, Marcus would wake up and go to work and help more families and teach Emma more lessons and live the life Jennifer had asked him to give their daughter. Not a life without struggle, not a life where everything was easy, but a life where dignity mattered, where kindness counted, where seeing people as human beings was the foundation of everything else. Some tips changed lives, and those lives changed other lives, and those other lives changed communities, and communities changed the world. One recognition at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one moment of seeing another person struggle and choosing to help instead of looking away. Forever forward, always forward. The invisible gravity of compassion, pulling everyone toward a future where no one had to choose between rent and food, between dignity and survival, between hope and despair. Where every person who needed help could find someone who'd been helped once, someone who remembered what it felt like, someone who chose to pass it forward because that was how the world got better. One tip at a time.